there's no jobs for philosophers these days.
Well,
So,
it turns out there are. Again, we just don't call them philosophy.
we just don't call them philosophers. We call them data modelers.
What does it mean to live a life of devotion? Is it prayer or practice, belief or structure? David Grover has been chasing that question most of his life, through philosophy, through data, through moments of emotional clarity and physical as well as cognitive collapse. He shares what it's like to live with a mind that builds systems, even as it questions its own foundations, and how that tension has shaped not just his work, but his understanding of what it means to be human. My name is JT Erickson, and this is No More Strangers.
It's a miracle. We're live, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, the miracles of being in San Jose.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for having me over, Dave.
No problem. Thanks for coming, JT.
All formal now. Yeah. So you're not a native of San Jose.
No.
Yeah, you're an Albertan, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How was that? How do you like it better here? I feel like you might. And welcome to San Jose.
So I grew up. Welcome to San Jose. I grew up in Alberta in the 70s and the 80s. And Alberta is a very conservative province. It's had really the same political party's been in charge since 1969, 1968, except for a short 3-year period where they had a kind of a what they call them the New Democratic Party, but it's kind of a semi-socialist, Canadian socialist, right? So soft socialist, more Bernie Sanders than anything else.
Okay.
My mom was my parents got divorced very early. My mom remarried when I was 6. She worked at a newspaper in the small city that I grew up in.
Okay.
Which is in southern Alberta, which was a refuge for polygamous Mormons. So southern Alberta was a refuge for polygamous Mormons after Utah achieved statehood.
That's oddly specific.
Yeah. Well, so Brigham Young said, move north, go north, right? And sent a bunch of his family up north. They settled in an area around what's called Cardston, a little town called Cardston, built a temple. And the population, when I was growing up, the population in southern Alberta was about 30% Mormon.
Okay.
So very, very Mormon.
Yeah.
And they refer to it as the buckle of the Bible Belt in Canada.
I'm realizing just how little I know about Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very conservative. So my stepfather worked at the Lethbridge Herald, the newspaper. He was a production manager. He kind of started out when he was 12, sweeping out the publisher's office, and then worked his way up. When my mom and my dad were married, they moved around a lot because my dad had been a cowboy. My grandfather managed ranches for years. And my dad had grown up a cowboy. And then when he married my mom and my grandmother kind of forced him to go back to school because he had a high school diploma and that was it. So I was almost born in Great Falls. I was about 3 hours away from being born in Great Falls, Montana. But my mom had been reading the newspaper and was adamant that I was not going to get drafted.
Oh, sure.
So 1969,
yeah.
Obviously she's reading lists of kids coming back in boxes, right? So she forced my dad to drive. He was in the middle of exams, forced him to drive to Lethbridge, which is about 3 hours. So that I would be born in Canada. And they got divorced when I was about 4. She remarried when I was 6. My stepfather was a narcissist.
Nice.
Asked for a divorce after about the first month. He had 4 kids, 2 of whom were sort of clinically and very clinically mentally ill. In negative ways, in personality disorders. And they did their best to make my mom's life a living hell.
His other children did?
Yeah, his other children. So it was it was a traumatic childhood in a kind of a classic sense.
Yeah, even though they were just married for a month?
Yeah.
How? So many questions, and maybe that's not important, or maybe it's incredibly important. I'm not sure.
It's like every other, it's like Tolstoy's comment about every happy family is the same and every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way.
Yeah.
I think it's the other way around with traumatic childhoods. Like,
yeah,
every traumatic childhood is roughly the same.
I've been hearing a lot of these stories lately.
Yeah.
Frankly. Yeah.
So that lasted till I was about 12. So 6 years, maybe 8. It's kind of hazy. My mom was kind of started out conservative, or kind of semi-conservative, and then moved progressively to the left. She worked in the editorial office, so she made up the editorial page, edited a lot of the editorials, ended up writing a lot of the editorials, and ended up doing what amounted to investigative journalism.
Very cool.
And took left-wing positions in agricultural community in a province that was really oriented towards oil.
It's a bold move, Dave.
Bold move, yeah. And became almost infamous to the point where she probably had really good name recognition around all of southern Alberta. She could have gotten hired in the bigger papers if she'd wanted to. She didn't like living in big cities, so she never moved to a big city. She could have got hired in bigger papers, but the bigger papers were much more tied to their advertising dollars.
Yep.
Right? So
And
their
she would be
editorial
ruffling a lot
positions
of...
needed to be very finely calibrated on
Yep.
what the guys downtown in the oil patch thought, right? So I went to university, wanted to really get into university very, very early, and I became interested in astronomy very young, like 5, and kind of transitioned from astronomy to particle physics at about 10 or 12. Started doing science fair projects in particle physics, which meant that I was doing theoretical particle physics, and I've got scare quotes around
big old
theoretical,
scare quotes,
right? Because it's hard to do science fair projects in theoretical particle physics. I went to the Canada-wide science fair a couple times.
Okay.
With these projects that really, like, most of the science fair projects in Lethbridge, in the town I grew up in, would be like the double slit experiment, or growing mold, or
I would assume it would be
work,
hydrogen peroxide volcanoes.
Peroxide volcanoes, even stuff like that. Yeah, much more practical. And so every time I showed up, there was always a debate about whether I was actually doing science, which
Right.
I think is an honest debate. It turns out what I was doing was philosophy.
That's right.
And I was going to major in physics, and I had a high school teacher, a social studies teacher. I was in the gifted and talented program roughly from grade 7 to grade 12, and had a social studies teacher who said, "You're not interested in physics, you're interested in philosophy." And I was like, "No." But then I started to think about it a little, and when I got to my first year of university, I ended up getting every letter grade. I got an F in calculus, and a D in linear algebra, and a C in physics, and a B in philosophy, and an A in logic.
I'm weirdly surprised by that. But I'm not.
Lowest grades I'd ever gotten in my life.
Yeah.
It took me the next 3.5 years to kind of climb my way out of that hole.
Yeah, and the logic and philosophy being an A and a B make total sense knowing what I know about you.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm still sort of, because the rest of the work that we do also requires, well, more logic, I suppose.
Yeah. Very
Okay.
little math.
Very little math. Very little math. Yeah.
And set theory, right? Like we do a lot of set theory.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we do.
And over the course of my undergraduate career, so I ended up taking 22 out of 40 semester courses in philosophy. I was way over prepared in philosophy. I had so much philosophy, it was coming out of my ears. And I got admitted to Stanford and University of Arizona for grad school, and also to Berkeley. But Berkeley didn't have any money. So I ended up going to Stanford because they had money. And
Not a bad school.
Not a bad school. It's made a name for itself over the years. But I was over prepared. And so interesting thing, I didn't know this about grad school programs in the United States, but you don't have to have really much philosophy at all to get into a philosophy grad program.
I actually didn't know that either.
Yeah.
I'm now questioning my decisions in life.
So I had 22 out of 40 semester courses. The next closest person in my cohort to that level had 13. And then, I mean, there are people with 2. There are people who had taken intro philosophy and then a course in aesthetics and got a recommendation and got into Stanford. And it was just amazing to me.
It's amazing.
And so I tuned out. I mean, I made every possible mistake that a grad student can make. I had a spectacularly bad graduate school career. There was one point, for example, I lived with some friends in the city, some other grad students in San Francisco, and I was supposed to proctor an exam. And I woke up early. The guy the roommate who was going to drive me down said, it only takes half an hour to get from San Francisco to Palo Alto. So he's like wandering around in his house coat, having a cup of coffee. I'm like trying to get him out the door. We run into traffic naturally because that's what happens when you drive from San Francisco to Palo Alto at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
And I missed the entire exam. And so they ran the exam themselves. At a certain point, I ended up, and so one of the things I was studying was philosophy of logic and philosophy of math.
Yeah.
And this was at a point when post-structuralism was really popular in philosophy. So post-structuralism is Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, right? So really the idea that and they were French philosophers, really the idea that the notion of structure was a cultural construct.
Okay.
Right? So and what I was sort of interested in was very much what you'd call nowadays a genealogy of math. Mm-hmm. So at the time, kind of the prevalent theory about math was that there was math was either based on logic or it was based on formalism. So just sort of the way that the sentences held together in a mathematical proof, or that it was coherent, so that there was some kind of emergent truth that would come out of it, right? But it was fairly obvious to me that a lot of what math was cultural.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that. Okay.
Yeah, math is. Now that doesn't mean that mathematical truth is cultural.
No, I wouldn't expect that.
But there's sort of this foundational notion of proof.
Yes.
In Anglo-American math, right? Kind of English and American math since about 1880. And the image of proof is very much based on this idea that it's reducible. Much of it is sort of, it points to Euclid, right? So the geometry, I didn't study geometry this way when I was a kid, but supposedly everybody sort of learns geometry this way, right?
As in through doing formal proofs.
Right. You learn the axioms.
Yeah.
And the axioms are sort of foundational and they're just obviously true. And from those axioms, you start to derive stuff.
The combination of theorems and hypotheses, and then the combinations of those to structure the rest of the argumentation. Yeah.
Right.
I was surprised when that was what they were teaching us in geometry. I was expecting more just, the basics, the measurements of area and shape
Right.
and angles, and it wasn't quite what it ended up being.
No. The thing that's sort of fascinating about this, right, is the axioms theoretically contain all of the content of geometry. What the proof does is kind of squeeze out specific theorems from those axioms, right? So you have a theorem and you derive a proof of that theorem. The proof itself is supposed to be some set of immutable steps that lead you to the theorem, right? Most of the time, the way the mathematicians work, though, they don't work from the proof to the theorem. They work from the theorem to the proof.
Sure, sort of backward, or working their way back into, this is what I've observed, this is what I've calculated, now let's make it quote unquote true.
Right. And the good theorems are obviously derivable from the axioms. There's this notion in deductive logic, which is mathematical logic, right? That in deductive logic, a theorem falls out of the axioms,
Yes.
right? The theorem doesn't do anything really so much as restate the content of the axioms. But you have all these various theories about how proof actually works, because mathematicians, as I said, they don't go from proof to theorem. They go from theorem to proof, right? They see the theorem. They believe that it's an obvious consequence of the axioms, and then they derive an argument that demonstrates the theorem. And in many cases, they may spend their entire lives trying to derive the argument. You look at the theorem and you know that it's true, but you can't demonstrate how it's true, right? So there's a mathematician named G.H. Hardy who, early 1900s, who described proof as gas.
In what way?
In the sense that the proof was nice to have.
Okay.
The really interesting thing was the theorem.
Yeah.
Because if you were an experienced enough mathematician, sort of was the position of a lot of these early 19th century or early 20th century mathematicians, if you're an experienced enough mathematician, you didn't need the proof because you could see the theorem, right? And there's an old joke in sort of in logic that the professor walks in and presents the axioms on the board and then presents the theorem and then just says the proof is trivial and is left to the student, right? And very often that's the actual test in mathematical logic. That's the homework.
Is to go and back your way into the proof.
Go and back your way into the proof, right? And there are, a number of different techniques to do the proof. There's a reductio ad absurdum, or there's the proof by induction, or a bunch of different stuff. So I'm studying all this proof stuff, and my undergrad mentor was very much a fan of alternative logics, what were referred to at the time as deviant logics.
Sure.
So most traditional logicians believe that logic has only two truth values, true and false.
Oh, okay.
What my mentor John Woods believed was that there could be multiple truth values. There could be true, false, and indeterminate. He also was really fascinated by the idea of what are referred to as paraconsistent logics. So these are logics where in traditional mathematical logic, bivalent logic, Aristotelian logic, if you believe in inconsistency, then anything follows from the inconsistency. So if a theorem is inconsistent, if you can demonstrate in the theory that a theorem is inconsistent, then literally anything follows in that theory.
Literally anything follows, meaning anything within the set of results.
Right.
Anything can be within that set, or anything within that set is then inconsistent.
So basically the proof goes P and not P. Mm-hmm. If you believe P and not P, then Q, where Q can be anything.
Okay.
So what fascinated John was the idea that people have all kinds of inconsistent beliefs, which we were talking
discussing
about earlier. But they don't believe everything. So they are
You've tied this together
rational.
nicely, by the way, with our prior conversation.
Right.
I like this.
So they are largely rational. It isn't the case that they when they discover P and not P, when they discover that they believe P and not P, that they end up believing anything as a result, right? So paraconsistent logics try to figure out based on various concepts like relevance, right?
Yep.
So if P and not P, Q, but is Q relevant? Is Q relevant to P? Is Q relevant to not P? Is Q a relevant conclusion?
Right.
Right? So paraconsistent logics go, study the idea that you can have theories with inconsistent propositions that don't imply everything, right? He was interested in relevance logic and in modal logic. So
reducing the set of Q basically to
Right.
a bound set. Okay.
right, trying to figure out how inference is actually structured. So John was very interested in natural logic. So not the logic of the mathematical logicians who sort of formalized logic and said this is the canonical theory of how math worked. John was interested in how people actually go about reasoning things, right? So in my second year, I had a crisis of confidence in proof. I didn't believe that I was proving anything. I couldn't follow through, and I, like I said, I had a spectacularly bad graduate degree.
Yeah.
So I dropped out of TAing the mathematical logic course, and refused to take it because I basically just had a block. I couldn't prove. And now I spend all my time proving. I mean, I don't do as much proof now in development as you do, for example. But but what we do is proof. Like
Largely.
that's sort of the bread and butter of the job, right?
Yep.
So I've been proving for the last 25 years, 30 years, but at the time I couldn't prove to save my life. I just didn't believe in proof.
That is
And that was a disaster.
a
because
disaster,
I was
but it's a
majoring
beautiful
in philosophy
yeah.
of math and philosophy of logic. Right?
Exactly. It's this beautiful. There's something beautiful about it, and I haven't put my finger on what that is yet. But there's a pseudo irony, and it almost looks like a crisis of faith.
Yeah.
And it's
There was a crisis of faith, very much a crisis of faith.
wow.
So I left the monastery.
Yeah, I was going to say I recently, as this morning, referred to you as a defrocked philosopher
Yeah.
to one of my friends, and I didn't realize just how accurate that was.
Totally.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about having left that in disgrace, basically, was that none of the other monks wanted anything to do with me.
Yeah, why would
right?
they? You're an outcast. You're a heretic.
I'm an outcast. I'm a heretic. So I went to work for a startup, and slowly came to realize that actually a lot of the work that was being done, a lot of the work that's done in kind of modern data management is identical to the problems that analytic philosophers that are common in philosophy of math, that are common in philosophy of language. So one of the basic ones, really the first one that I did was this very common problem that you'll recognize, which is, so I was working for a company that was trying to report in restaurant chains across different product catalogs. So they would get all the orders
Yep.
from the restaurant chain, and there were all these different product catalogs, and they all characterized Heinz ketchup in the 12-ounce bottle with different codes.
Yep.
And so this fundamental problem was that, they had a million in sales here and 2 million in sales there, but they couldn't report the total sales because they had different product codes. So what I built was a system for rationalizing that. So there's this very classic problem in philosophy of language that was first pointed out by the very anti-Semitic founder of modern logic, Gottlob Frege, in the 1880s, which is how do you prove that Venus is the morning star and the evening star? So Venus, the referent of the morning star, Venus is this object, but it has two meanings. There's two phrases that have different meanings. Sorry, I'm messing this up. So if you take the phrase the morning star, that refers to Venus, but the meaning of the morning star is different than the referent,
Okay.
right? The phrase the evening star also refers to Venus, but it has a different meaning, right? So the two meanings, morning star and evening star, are very different, but they have the same referent. So basically, you've got two product codes,
Yep.
morning star and evening star, pointing to the same object.
The same object, yep.
right? So Frege created this whole, he founded philosophy of language and philosophy of logic, modern analytic philosophy of language and philosophy of logic, around this problem. We have lots of words that mean different things that point to the same object.
Yeah. Meanwhile, it is something that almost seems to be an obvious, natural approach to observing and solving these problems that we have. Would
Right.
never have occurred to me that this would be a foundational element
Right.
to the philosophy of language.
Yeah, so it's a basic problem in philosophy of language. And it turns out,
That actually makes sense. Sorry, I just got there.
yeah,
Wow.
and it turns out that it's also like the foundational problem in modern data management,
Yeah.
right?
And it all comes down to communication and understanding and labels and
Right.
oh,
But
that's funny.
it's fundamental
It is.
that people create their own words to describe the same thing, right?
Yeah.
The bottle of Heinz ketchup that you see on every table in every diner in the United States
Yep.
has its own product catalog in that particular restaurant, and every restaurant has its own product catalog, and they all have different codes. They all have different words to describe the same thing.
This makes so much more sense of the work that you and I have been doing for
Right.
decades now.
Yeah.
And it always comes down to how can we best explain what's actually happening, like a fundamental description of reality that can then be understood by everybody.
Totally.
It is essentially what we've been doing for decades.
Yeah.
I never put that nice fancy coat of paint on it, but it's truth.
Right. So funny thing about my career is that I get ejected from the monastery,
Yeah.
but I end up doing what amounts to professional philosophy.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And only instead of calling it the sense reference problem, we call it master data management.
That's right.
Because we got to actually figure it out.
Because we're operating in more or less the real world.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
More
the
or less.
computing science world.
Right, more or
but
less.
It's more or less the real world. Right. So that was kind of the beginning of my career. And I built master data management systems in a lot of different places, and it's still, I get paid to do philosophy. I get paid to do proof, right? And I probably made more money than I would have made if I'd graduated with a PhD from Stanford and gone on to some school. So
Yes.
and had more fun. Worked in more places. I mean, a lot of the guys I went to grad school with have worked for the same university for 25, 30 years. Because they get tenure track, they're not moving.
No, why would you?
And there's no jobs. There's no jobs for philosophers these days.
Well,
So-
it turns out there are. Again, we just don't call them philosophy.
We just don't call them philosophers. We call them
Yeah.
data modelers.
And, it's so funny. Several jobs back, a colleague and I were referred to by some of the old school data engineers and architects as we were the philosopher kings.
Yeah.
And it always cracked me up, and I had never actually connected the dots to the reality of what we were doing was legitimate philosophy work.
Totally.
That's really funny to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I had this revelation a couple of years ago. Because I mean, I knew that I was writing SQL.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I was demonstrating, quantitative results, business numbers.
Right.
By writing a proof from first principles from a data model that would allow you to derive a set of numbers. And I was flying back. It was the first time I'd been in New York. And I bought a book in one of the bookstores downtown. called 99 Variations on a Proof by a guy named Philip Ordnung. And what he did was he demonstrated, he ended up resolving this conflict that I had about proof.
Oh, no kidding. Did you know this when you picked up the book?
I thought it was fascinating when I picked up the book.
Okay.
And I read it on the plane back, and it's a part of a French movement called Oulipo, and the idea is to do these variations on things, right? To try different things out. So what Ordnung does is he takes this basic, I can't remember the basic theorem, but he shows 99 different ways that theorem has been proved.
That is your red meat.
That's red meat, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I realized at that point that I was doing proof, that I was doing proof all day. And it really kind of resolved a lot of very, very old conflicts for me in my career. I started writing some stuff. I wrote a bunch of stuff about data analysts are proof writers, and really started pushing the idea that what we were doing was proof at the company we worked for. I don't think anybody paid any attention to it.
I've read bits and pieces. Now I feel like I need to reread it. Good Lord. I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, that was my career. That's how I ended up in San Jose. I've been here, the thing is, there is no other place that really does data management as core as they do it in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And that's been, it's a fundamental problem in e-commerce. And I started in e-commerce in 1996. It's been a fundamental problem in healthcare. It's a fundamental problem in finance. It's all over the place. And so I've done these jobs where I go from company to company and try to build up a proof architecture, what we call colloquially a data model, right? That allows you to demonstrate numbers consistently.
Yes.
And it's been, it's been an interesting 30 years.
Yeah. Wow, you're tying a lot of ideas and concepts together for me, and I'm going to be sitting with this one tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite courses in high school were, literal favorite course was geometry, doing proofs. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah.
And the only coursework that I enjoyed in college was philosophy. Everything else was kind of bullshit to me.
Right.
Yeah. So, whoops. Thanks. Glad we met, Dave.
Yeah. Well, now you do arguments for a living.
I do.
That's basically what you do.
That's basically what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so funny. Damn it. I didn't see that coming from this. Okay.
Yeah. Grab a tangent and hold on.
Yeah. 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 I had expected several different paths than this today. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm into it. You blew my mind, Dave. I'm just gasping for air at this moment.
So,
Yeah.
a couple things happened on the way, right?
Yeah.
When I was 17, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And it's very rare for a 17-year-old to be diagnosed with hypothyroidism. Almost unheard of for a man to be diagnosed with hypothyroidism.
Okay.
Until he's in his 60s.
Yeah.
Women get diagnosed, like when women get diagnosed with hypothyroidism, it's usually 30.
Yeah. I think my dad may have had hypothyroidism. They ended up removing a chunk of it.
Right. That might have been
he
more
was in his
thyroid
40s.
cancer. But yeah.
It wasn't cancer. But
Oh, no.
yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of realized at that point that I had an autoimmune disorder, because that's what hypothyroidism is.
Yeah.
But I never got diagnosed with anything further. I just started on the replacement hormone and have been on the replacement hormone ever since.
Yep. Yep. That's the same. Yeah.
In 1996, so so I quit grad school May of 1996, got a job at a startup in September of 1996. December 15th, my girlfriend was run over by a bus.
Right.
Like 10 days before Christmas. And it was like an absolute shock.
Of course.
Just a total shock. And that led to developing PTSD and hypervigilance, because at that point I'm watching for fucking buses everywhere.
100%.
Right?
And it's, I mean, just to interject, like it's sort of nice that you have, nice, weird way to put it, nice that you have a very solid line in the sand demarcation. You know exactly where this comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. So she and I broke up a couple of years later, for a variety of reasons. And she survived. So really horrific accident, given a 20% chance of living, but she made her way through the whole thing. She got a good settlement from the city, and she now works as a lawyer doing child advocacy.
Nice.
Using the money that she won from the accident to basically support that work. But a few years later, 2000, well, sort of around 1998, I started to notice that I had, that I was running out of breath. Mm-hmm. So I was working in Palo Alto, living in the city, and I would walk from the train station up to Market Street to catch the bus. And I did that walk, which was about a mile in 15 minutes. And then I started slowing down and having trouble with all sorts of stuff. And a couple of years later, I ended up in really severe, I had a condition called pernicious anemia, which turns out runs in the family and is also very common. People tend to end up with a combination of hypothyroidism, celiac, and pernicious anemia, or hypothyroidism, vitiligo, and pernicious anemia. There's a kind of a couple of different things. And this led to another bout of PTSD.
Sure.
Another bout of trauma. I got a diagnosis, and the doctor that diagnosed me kind of figured that I was just a .com guy who sat at his desk all the time. So he told me to go to the gym, and I diligently went to the gym, but I was progressively losing the ability to walk.
Okay.
And because what happens with pernicious anemia, it's the inability to absorb B12, vitamin B12. And B12 is a critical vitamin for nerve growth.
Yep.
So what happens is your nerves start to die back. And I mentioned this to you yesterday when we were talking, that I broke 3 toothbrushes over the course of that summer, because I was plastic toothbrushes. I was pushing them against my gums so hard because I couldn't feel my gums, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't feel the toothbrush on my gums. So election day 2000, I am locked in my chair at work, and I'm basically half in and half out of consciousness for most of that week. And I can't stand up.
Wow.
So they call an ambulance for me, and they take me to the hospital, and my girlfriend shows up, who became my wife. And the doctor looks at me and says, well, what's the problem in the emergency room? And I say, well, I have a slip disc, and my doctor thinks, and I'm convinced of the diagnosis that I've got, that I have basically a slip disc, and I'm not exercising enough. And
meanwhile,
and
you're in the
forth.
gym every day.
Meanwhile, I'm basically getting more and more anemic, and I'm in order to get to the bus stop from where I'm working on Sutter Street, I like stumble from parking meter to parking meter because I can't walk. Right?
Wow! All this,
people think
you
I'm
thought
drunk.
in your head that this is just a slip disc, and
this is just a slip disc. This is
wow.
nerve damage. Yeah. I'm like, if I get the least bit cold, I completely freeze up, like I get paralyzed more or less. So just an astonishing physical disability, right? And the emergency room doctor says, no, I don't think it's that. Mm-hmm. And she does this very basic blood test called a CBC. I can't remember what CBC stands for, but
But I think it's one of the core blood tests.
It's
It's a standard.
core standard blood test. My doctor never ran it. And she sees that my red blood cells, which are the reason that I'm anemic is because my red blood cells are enormous, because that's one of the problems with the B12 absorption is they don't have the ability to bind to oxygen, and they're really big. And so that's the marker for pernicious anemia is that your red blood cells are really, really large, right? And she sees that. She says, "Oh, you have pernicious anemia." And it's really easy to fix. You just take B12. And so over the course of the next year or so, year and a half or so, I'm taking B12. I'm taking B12 shots, and I'm recovering. And I'm able to walk, and I'm slowly getting my gait back, and slowly getting my strength back. But again, PTSD, just a really enormous dose of medical trauma. Just a deep fear of going to the doctor. Right?
For a fair reason.
For
the
fair
experience that you had is
yeah. One of the things that really scared the crap out of me when my girlfriend was in the hospital was she was a smoker, and not a significant smoker, maybe half a pack a day, and all when she came home from work and would sit down. She worked at the ACLU, and she'd sit down and she'd have a beer and she'd have some cigarettes, right? But she hid it from her parents. And so her parents had flown up, they were in there, and she had been induced in a medically induced coma, and they wanted to reinflate her lung, which had collapsed in the bus accident. And the doctors didn't want to talk to me. They talked to the parents, because that's kind of the basic rule about about medical directives, is that you talk to the closest family members.
Oh no.
And so I happened to pass the office when they were all in there talking, and her dad said, her dad and her stepmom and her mom were all there, and there were these two internists, and they were saying, and her dad said, "Oh, David, we should ask, we should just tell you what's going on." And they described how they were going to reinflate her lung, and it was going to be fine, and it would work just great as long as she didn't smoke. And her parents all nodded along very carefully and said,
"Oh, what a situation.
Emily doesn't smoke. That's fine, right?" And I said, "Well, not
so fast.
Not so fast."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they almost killed her because they just the thing that I graduated, my degree was in epistemology, which is theory of knowledge, and I studied logic and philosophy of science and kind of the basic reasoning pattern that science goes through. And unlike math and logic, science had gone through a long period where sociology of knowledge was this really kind of fundamental reconfiguration of how science gets done, right? Like instead of science being thought of as this ivory tower, completely logical, rational process of evolving a conclusion, right? It's people who are doing actual work,
right?
Who and like one of the things that I really didn't like about my physics course was my first physics course, the only physics course I took in that first semester, was the fact that we had to do these errors. We had to do this error calculation on these experiments, and very clearly, millions of kids were doing these experiments all across the continent.
Yeah.
At that point, why was I calculating an error when everybody knew what the fucking error was? Right. But that's how science is done. Science is done in labs. Labs are run by PIs. They're kids are paying attention or they're not paying attention. The data is aggregated in various ways, right? So it scared the crap out of me that these internists almost made a decision on the basis of a complete lack of information.
Yeah.
Right? That they really had no incentive to go and talk to me except for he's the boyfriend. He might know more about what she's actually doing than the parents do. But that's a sociological thing. That's not a scientific thing. That is the kind of thing that an experienced doctor might say before you go and run that procedure, right? And here it is, 4 years later. I could have avoided 2 years of pain and emotional destruction and all kinds of just devastation all over the place, permanent damage to my inner ear, problems. Most of the nerves have grown back, but there's permanent lesions on my spinal cord and various other places, and I know this because I have balance problems.
Right.
All of it because the guy didn't give me a CBC.
Yeah.
Right? All of it because the guy didn't give me a CBC. So yeah, just terrified. And then a few years later, I ended up with cancer as well.
And navigating that had to be...
Navigating that was interesting. It was
fascinating.
It was, the thing is, like, all of these things have almost killed me or people close to me, but not.
Right. And I'm assuming that this all influenced the way that you attacked the approach, because I don't think you would passively go through the cancer diagnosis and management of all of that.
The
through
thing
the
is,
medicals.
you don't really know.
Yeah.
Like, the thing about a cancer diagnosis that's kind of fascinating is they tell you that I had testicular cancer, which my oncologist said is the kind of cancer you want to get if you're going to get cancer, right? It was 95% survival rate at that point.
It doesn't sound like the kind of cancer you want, but yes.
If you're going to get cancer, that's the cancer. I mean, if you're a woman, you're out of luck. But if you could get cancer, that's the one you want to get. 10 years earlier, what's his name? The bike.
Oh, Lance Armstrong.
Lance Armstrong was 10 years earlier, before most of the treatments that I had came along. His survival rate was 30%, 40% because it was a killer at that point. It was very dangerous cancer. One of the downsides of that cancer, though, is, the long-term survival rate's really high, but they fill you full of platinum.
Right.
So I ended up, my bill was like $60,000 worth of platinum is what they put into me. That was the cost of the platinum specifically. And that stuff, like, you can theoretically chelate that stuff over time, but it damages your kidneys, damages your liver. I had a drinking problem for most of that. So, but it's really hard on the kidneys and does all kinds of stuff. So you survive, but then you're looking at reduced kidney function over the course of the rest of your life. So, but yeah, you don't really know. Like, that's the thing about the cancer is they tell you you've got this diagnosis. They basically give you morphine and put a line into your arm and start feeding you poison.
Yep.
And you don't know whether you're getting better or not, right?
Yeah, because you're certainly not feeling better while you're going through the process.
Better. You lose your hair.
Yep.
Yeah. So that set me up for medical trauma for quite a while.
Yeah. Which then leads into all sort. You already had however many predicates to PTSD.
Yeah.
And more. Your girlfriend being hit by the bus, there's more than PTSD there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a lot of fear. A lot of fear. So that creates hypervigilance.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And a reluctance to talk to anybody about it.
Which is par for the course with, so I would say 3 or 4 of the last men that I've had on the show have expressed exactly that. Yeah. Like a reluctance to go talk to somebody, a reluctance to engage with, I don't know that it's, I'm going to probably use the wrong framework here, but I don't know that it's necessarily a mental illness, but it's definitely debilitating. And it definitely damages your lifestyle or your capacity for happiness. Yeah. Which maybe does qualify as a mental illness. I think
the thing is, hypervigilance is, like, there's all kinds of hypervigilance, right? There's hypervigilance from being in Iraq and being an Iraqi or being a U.S. service member in
Right.
Iraq, right? There's hypervigilance from traumatic childhoods or refugee experiences,
Yep.
or
Boy, you're ticking off all the people I've talked to recently. This is good.
being in a fire.
Yeah.
Like your house catches fire and you
Right.
lose everything. Or,
And the body
or-
and the brain don't know the difference between any of these.
Right. I think what happens though is the point at which this happened to me in the culture. The culture was, so there's a particular combination for me of like not trusting professionals
Right.
because I had trusted the professionals and
Look
they
where
let me
that
down.
got you. Right.
Right? And so kind of a basic lack of trust in things. And a sense that I could manage it myself, which I think is very common with men.
Yes, it is.
Right?
Yes. And not just for ourselves, we want to manage it for others as well, the
Right.
best that we can.
Yeah. So yeah, it just led to 20 years of not taking care.
Yeah.
A lot of anxiety builds
Yeah.
up over that.
Turns
right?
out.
Yeah, a lot of anxiety.
And Dave, what happens at the end of all of this, right?
Well, so
like
that's
we
the thing.
both know how this starts to go.
So I got laid off. I got laid off. I didn't get laid off. I got fired because I was burned out in 2018 from a job I just didn't want to do anymore. And partly that was because I'd been doing data architecture work at that point for 20
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Since 97, 98. Yeah.
And I had come to the conclusion that it wasn't possible to do the work because nobody wanted me to actually do the work. Like it was very much the kind of experience where they woo you during the interview phase and then they hire you and then they spend the first couple weeks telling you what not to touch.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Damn it, that's
Can't
true.
go there, can't go there, can't do this.
These
don't
are the
talk to
systems
those
we
people.
can't touch, and
These are the systems we can't touch.
and here are the problems you need to solve,
And here are the
which
problems you need to
require you to
solve.
touch those systems, but
Right.
you can't. So
But you can't.
So then we end up building bridge systems, which end up overcomplicating the
Right.
architecture. It works, but
Yeah.
it's fragile.
So I just decided it wasn't. I come to the conclusion that data architecture as an FTE at a company, as an employee of a company where you were supposed to build consensus, and fundamentally
Yeah.
the kind of work that we do is integrating different systems, integrating different models.
Fundamentally, yeah.
Right. So and these models are every bit as hefty as kind of your basic ideology, right?
Yes.
People who work in one kind of software application are every bit as devoted to the assumptions of that software application as they are to Catholicism or Buddhism or whatever their kind of religion of choice is.
It might even be more because it impacts their day-to-day life in ways that are material and
Right.
observable.
That's actually true. They spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day, 5, 6, 7 days a week
Yep.
in the middle of this model, right? Like studying the way that it divides the world up and trying to predict which way it's going to go.
Yeah.
And right next to them is somebody who works in an entirely different system that divides the world up in a completely different way, that has a completely different set of assumptions about how things work.
Yeah.
And sort of the role of a data architect is to get those people together.
Right. That's right. And if you can't get them individually in a room and identify what their belief set is, and then just go back and fix it yourself. When you throw your hands up in the air about getting consensus.
Totally.
You develop it on your own and now you have a third way. Whoops. There's an XKCD on that, which is perfect.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't. Yeah. Sometimes you just cannot reconcile those two different positions.
That's right.
There's no way to kind of merge them. You have to create a third way.
That's right.
That is in a sense larger, that has a broader set of assumptions,
Yep.
so that you can gloss the different assumptions that are fundamental to those two systems. But again, to your point, like they may go to church religiously every Sunday. They may pray every night for 30 minutes with
That's
their
aggressive,
family
yeah.
around the table. That would be a very devout religious person.
We would define it as such, yes.
We would define it as such. But they spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week thinking about the content of that software application.
That's right.
They have more. They're more devoted to the assumptions in that software application than they are to their religion.
There's also a fundamental statement of definition of value in life
Yeah.
with this, which I think most people, not most people, I know several people, I won't paint with a broader brush than that, would decry and say, oh, well, that's not reality. That's not how it works. But it is through our actions that we actually show who we are and what we believe and what's important to us. And what you're describing is pretty spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I didn't think it was possible to do that work. It's not possible. It wasn't possible to do that work as a full-time employee who was building consensus and not pissing anybody off and sustaining a relationship across the organization that was respected and also doing the work.
Yeah.
So it was often the case.
It's funny.
It was often the case that it was a choice between being an asshole and developing the theory that merged the two systems, or spending 5, 10, 15 years kicking the can down the road so you didn't insult anybody.
The third way was the one that I took, and it was more, I spent a lot more time, and you can probably attest to this, I spent a lot more time building the relationships and convincing people that, yeah, no, what you're doing is fine, I just need this little tweak.
Right.
And then slowly building up as an FTE. And I found that to be a very satisfying approach as well, because it afforded me the opportunities to do the things that I love, which is talking to people.
Right.
And you're right, I had to kick the can down the road on a few things. And none of these roles are still there.
Right.
So I suppose that also throws a little mud in my face.
Well, I think that's the question, is how much patience you've got.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how much patience do you actually have for building that consensus?
Yeah.
And in some cases, choosing to nibble around the edges for an entire year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I had less patience than you.
That's
I
fair.
think. So
I'm
got laid off.
going to remember that for later, because I am not notoriously patient.
Right. So I got fired December 2017. I am on an H-1B visa.
Oh, right.
And this is the first year of the Trump administration.
Right.
And it's not just that there are no jobs for immigrants.
There aren't many jobs.
There aren't many jobs. And I'd quit drinking in 2011. My wife quit drinking a year before that. And I'd started drinking when I was 17, and it managed my anxiety.
Yes.
Which is, I think,
I missed it. Yeah.
one of the reasons why a lot of people drink.
Yeah. I miss it.
Yeah. But cannabis became legal in California
Oh, right.
in January of 2018.
Good timing.
And I thought, okay, I'll just have a little. And it was amazing. My anxiety went away. Just an amazing consequence to that anxiety.
Yeah.
My kids noticed.
And when it's a little,
my wife noticed.
it'll do that.
When it's a little, it'll do that. And I didn't really smoke a lot.
Right.
I would have maybe, like, I'm basically a lightweight.
Yeah.
Probably because of the cancer and because of the pernicious anemia and the hypothyroidism and my genetic makeup, whatever.
Sure.
I didn't really have more than half a joint most of the time. I would take a couple of puffs over the course of the day.
Yeah.
But it really reduced my anxiety. Just amazing. The thing is that over time, I got psychotic.
Yeah.
I started to get delusional. The anxiety was still fine, but I was, the hypervigilance decreased. There would be moments of paranoia or moments of flights of grandiosity or moments of, right? And at the end of that 2018 period, I ended up coming to work for the company we both work for now as a
Right.
consultant. And that was like a relief. One of the things that I kind of enjoyed about that was that my boss, Wes,
Yeah.
said that I would never have to work with a MongoDB because he would never give it. He was absolutely opposed to it. And a MongoDB is basically a system that doesn't require any structure at all. So
I've never had to work in it. Thank God.
It's a disaster from the standpoint of somebody who's trying to integrate data, right? So it was a lot of fun. I cut back on my smoking, and I started to get paranoid. I actually got anxious. I got more anxious, and I had trouble with clients as a result of that. And I would smoke a little more, and I would relax a little bit, but then I would feel guilty about smoking.
Right.
At a certain point, I got divorced for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
And ended up living on my own in the apartment we're currently in, and really started to feel that something was wrong. And I felt that there was something wrong mentally for a long time. So, and I was having what I thought of as voices. I was hearing voices, and I was like believing that people were talking about me in the street.
What do they call that? It's a form of a delusion.
Yeah. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But it's delusional.
Yeah.
Basically delusional.
Yeah. I know you'd mentioned it in the past, and I thought it was a really interesting insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I made an appointment with a psychiatric nurse because I just got to a point where I was just like, there's something really wrong. I feel awful. I was in a depression at the time, obviously, feeling just terrible. And made an appointment with a psychiatric nurse, and in 5 minutes he diagnosed me as bipolar. And I had a diagnosis of bipolar when I was 18.
Yeah.
And he put me on a bunch of different antidepressants, and none of them really made a difference. And I believed the bipolar diagnosis worked because when I would smoke cannabis, I would get grandiose.
Sure. And I've observed some of that. Yeah.
Which is one of the things that cannabis does to people.
Yeah.
Makes you euphoric as well.
Little bit.
So that matches a kind of a hypomania or a mania type diagnosis for bipolar, right? And he put me on a atypical antipsychotic called loracidone.
Yep.
And within 2 days, and lorациdone's a very powerful drug. Within 2 days, what it does is it modulates dopamine and serotonin.
Yep.
So sometimes it increases serotonin or dopamine, sometimes it decreases serotonin or dopamine.
So it's more of a moderation.
More of a moderation, right?
Reducing those highs and the lows.
Reducing the highs and the lows that theoretically lead to delusions, right? And pretty much immediately the impulsivity went away that I had. The delusions went away. The sense that I was hearing, what I described to myself as hearing voices went away.
Right.
And I continued to smoke cannabis, but less.
Yeah.
And so I really bought into the bipolar diagnosis.
And there's an interesting sort of through line here, right? Like you had all of this medical trauma.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of, let's call it trust issues with the medical establishment. And presumably because you had this diagnosis when you were 18, you were already opened up to being, I don't know, accepting of this 5-minute diagnosis. Not to be like foreshadowing, but it seems like a great through line.
Well, I mean, if you'd sort of said, well, how long did the guy take?
Right.
Right. And my ex-wife mentioned just recently, any diagnosis that happened in 5 minutes is probably worthy of a second of opinion.
Yeah.
I didn't get one.
Yeah.
Much
Because
the
it-
way
because
I
it
didn't get a
tracked for
second
you.
opinion with the pernicious anemia until I
Right.
was in a hospital bed.
Right. Because it aligned with your expectations on some level,
Right.
and the initial results of the medication were quite positive.
And the trust in science,
Yeah.
the trust in experience.
Noting
right?
that it's not the science that was at issue here.
Right.
Once more, it's
Right.
more the, as you described it earlier, the sociological constraints.
Totally. Yeah. So kind of continued on this. I went up, I was on 20 milligrams, went up to 40, went up to 60. One of the side effects of lurasidone is a condition called akathisia.
Yeah.
Akathisia is restlessness. It's described as restlessness.
Yeah.
But it's more like you're trying to crawl out of your skin and you feel doom. And it's terrible. It's one of the things that it reminded me of, though, very specifically, was pernicious anemia, was because your limbs get stiff.
Oh, wow.
So you would get anxious. You would think, I'm having an anxiety attack, because
Yeah.
that's what it sort of seems like. And I would go for a walk, and I wouldn't be able to walk fluidly, and I would feel the stiffness in my legs, and I would have a gait problem the way I had with pernicious anemia. So
Which probably pulled you all the way back into the mental state that you were in back when
Totally.
you had the
Yeah.
aggressively pernicious anemia.
yeah, so it would always start an hour and a half after I took the pill.
Oh, God.
It didn't happen every night, but it happened fairly regularly, and so I started to shrink things, because I used to teach a course for the astronomy club here in San Jose on a monthly basis, and I went to a star party once when I was in this apartment and got akathisia in the truck on the way back, and really at that point stopped going out.
Yeah.
So I would go to places in the neighborhood, because if I had the attack, I could make it home
Right.
and then sort of deal with the whatever it was.
And
Because
deal
I
with
thought
it
it was a panic
safely.
attack.
Right.
I thought it was, and I didn't have this problem before I started the lorazepam. I went back down to 20 milligrams, which is not even the therapeutic dose.
Yeah.
It's not even really the therapeutic dose. So in about June of last year, I started to get intrusive thoughts again. I started to ruminate.
Right.
Specifically, I'd wake up at 4 a.m. or 3:30 a.m. and worry about stuff. And
Which and having dealt with exactly that and not seeing it as weirdly, I will admit, and you know, I've talked about rumination in the past, and I've sort of waffled on my stance on whether it's a positive or a negative.
yeah,
I mean, the same thing was stifling for my life for years, waking up at 2, 3 a.m., unable to get back to sleep, overheating in the body based on the stress caused by the things I was ruminating over.
yeah,
And it's a horrifying form of life, and it's destructive
totally.
to your psyche, to your experience of everything.
Well, I think like,
And for me, a lot of it was work stress, which is insane.
right, it's work stress.
And
But
it's not even important work stress.
it's not even important work stress.
Yeah.
But it is a series of obsessive thoughts and the compulsion to try to work through the thought.
Yes, and the only thing that would ever work for me was to sit there at 2, 3, 4 a.m. and write down plans to resolve any and all issues,
Yeah.
because without it, there was no resolution in my mind.
Yeah. Totally. So I realized that I was in a depression.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend told me that I was in a depression, more or less, and saved me. And I went, been very lucky, very strong women have been in my life. And I got a diagnosis from a psychiatrist who prescribed me Wellbutrin, generic for Wellbutrin. Again, 10 minutes.
And it was gone.
10 minutes he diagnosed me, suggested it. One of the problems that people with bipolar have with antidepressants, if they're not on a mood stabilizer, is that it can trigger hypomania. It's very common.
Interesting.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of people discover that they're bipolar because they go get a diagnosis for depression, get put on an SSRI,
Yeah.
and develop hypomania as a result.
And in this case, hypomania really sort of manifesting as an inability to act is my expectation.
No.
Hypomania? I thought it meant maybe it went backwards.
Hypomania means little mania.
Yeah, that's what
right. Not the. In this case, hypo is not the opposite of hyper.
Oh, okay.
It's a diminishment. It's still mania.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Because I thought it was the same thing. When I first heard hypomania, I thought,
right.
Well, like hypothyroidism, your
Right.
thyroid isn't working.
It's
and
below
hyperthyroidism, your thyroid is working too much.
Right.
I thought hypomania was depression.
But in this case, it's still a mania.
In this case, it's still a mania. It's just a more manageable form of mania.
I mean, that doesn't sound too bad. I'm joking. I'm sorry.
Right. The thing with antidepressant-induced hypomania is like it's often the first. In many cases, it's often the first time that someone will recognize that they've got hypomania, and so they'll stay up for days on end. They'll spend a ton of money. They'll go out and have an affair. They'll do all kinds of crazy stuff. Right.
Wow.
Random stuff.
Yeah.
Without being able to control.
A complete lack of impulse control. Just
Right.
Pure
Complete
compulsion.
lack of impulse control. Complete lack of impulse control without the mood stabilizer, right?
Wow.
So he suggested Wellbutrin, and for a variety of reasons, some of which were quite valid. And so I started taking it and really felt an immense difference right away. But one of the things that I noticed was that I was able to sit and watch a movie for the first time in my life.
Right.
And I mentioned this. So Wellbutrin is used off-label for ADHD because it's a kind of a stimulant medication, and you get lots of arguments about whether it's a stimulant or not. But it's a derivative of methamphetamine, similar to Ritalin, and so that's where it gets its dopamine boosting effect. So it specifically boosts dopamine and norepinephrine instead of regulating serotonin. And I found I could focus, which was weird to me. I still had akathisia. I didn't think of it as akathisia because all this time I'm still thinking it's an anxiety attack. It's an anxiety attack. And I start to develop back spasms, like debilitating back spasms where I can't actually walk. And my girlfriend and my mom made all sorts of, well, try meditation. And my therapist is like, try this. And you got to just calm down. And I slowly come to realize, like one day about a month ago, 2 months ago, it was December. I go into work and I've been up again till midnight, basically with back spasms. Can't sleep. I'm moving around, tossing and turning, feeling doom, wake up the next morning. I've been studying because one of the things about bipolar is that you're hypomanic. When I quit smoking cannabis, I didn't have any hypomania.
Yeah.
There was no grandiosity. There was no euphoria. There was no, and I really started to doubt the bipolar diagnosis because I couldn't remember any time when I'd been hypomanic.
Yeah.
Lots of times when I'd kind of spent a ton of money, lots of times when I had impulse control problems, but no times when I was really the kind of the marker for bipolar hypomania is bipolar 2 hypomania is you have a ton of energy and you're not tired the next day.
Right. Right.
Like you're up and you're not tired. And then maybe you crash and you're tired, but you're not wrecked the next day. And I'd never if I'm up to midnight, I am toast the next day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's just been a common problem for me since I was 10.
Oh God, I was hoping you were going to say since 40.
No,
Okay.
no.
So that's when it hit me.
Yeah, no, it's been a long time. And so I really started to doubt the bipolar diagnosis, and I came into work and searched back spasms, loracidone, basically. And post after post just described it as akathisia. And I thought that I hadn't had akathisia. I thought that I'd had something else.
Right.
But I realized it was akathisia. So I determined to get off the loracidone. And I made an appointment with a psychiatrist, another appointment with a psychiatrist, because I stopped talking to the psychiatrist who diagnosed me with the Wellbutrin, because again, I felt, well, this guy only talked to me really for 10, 15 minutes. He doesn't know anything about me.
Right.
And this is apparently a common problem with psychiatry. I think
I've heard that said, yes.
I mean, it's like saying, it's noisy in San Jose. It's like a common problem with psychiatry. They don't actually talk to you. Yeah. So I made an appointment with a psychiatrist and went and talked to her. And she talked to me for about 2 hours and told me to go off the loracidone because she didn't figure I had bipolar.
Yeah.
She figured I had instead OCD, which, and part of the reason for this misdiagnosis was because I'd used the term voices to describe rumination.
Right.
So intrusive thoughts in OCD can take a bunch of different forms. They can tell you that you're a terrible person, right? The thoughts can repeatedly come in. They can they can sound like different people in your life, right? But it's intrusive thoughts. So you use the wrong vocabulary term, voices.
And they don't ask. They just assume that everybody means, which comes directly back to what we do.
Right.
And the discussion on the theory of language.
Right. The meaning is different. The referent is the same.
The meaning is different.
Right.
Yeah.
And the referent for voices for a psychiatric professional is delusions.
Right.
Sitting in a room, hearing somebody talk to you as if they are in the room.
Right.
Not a thought
Right.
that sounds like your grandmother.
I think you referred to it once as being in a Scottish brogue.
A Scottish brogue.
Yeah.
Right. Or people in your life.
Yes.
Right. All of which is the form that an intrusive thought can take, right? And OCD makes sense. She figures OCD and possibly ADHD because the Wellbutrin seems to affect the focus so well.
Right, you mentioned that.
And I do have probably an inattentive form of ADHD. I can hyperfixate and focus for extended periods of time, and then I can go for long periods of time where I can't read, or I'm rereading the same paragraph multiple times, or I'm watching a movie and I'm flipping through Twitter and I'm back and forth on things and not paying attention, or I'm married to somebody and I'm not paying attention to what they're saying, or I'm angry behind the wheel. All this sort of thing is a common problem with ADHD, and it's likely that the ADHD kind of triggers the OCD, but the OCD is also a function of hypervigilance.
Sure. And I think we had previously discussed it also as sort of a very reasonable evolutionary step towards self-preservation.
Yeah, totally. OCD is fundamentally an attempt to create a structure, right?
Yep.
A soothing structure.
Right. Ritualistic for some people, just little patterns that help you feel safer in a space, or however it manifests in your experience of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the rumination piece is the compulsion that's driven by the obsessive thought. So there's a form of OCD called pure OCD.
Oh.
So
that wasn't meant to be funny.
The kind of the standard understanding of OCD is somebody who washes their hands all the time, or checks the stove, or checks locks, right? But pure O is often has no physical manifestation. It's just rumination. So it is a thought, an intrusive thought that occurs, that becomes obsessive, that you become obsessed with, that you circle around and around and around on. So there's one example of kind of And obsessive thought is a form of Piro called emotional contamination. So you believe that an article of clothing has some kind of you can't wear it because
There's an association there.
An association.
Sure.
Right?
Oof. It's cutting close, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I like it's a very common problem, right? I mean, it's not super common, but I think that like combinations of hypervigilance and conditions that cause you to try to create structure, right? So, and we talked a little bit about this the other day, right? There's like one of the things that bothered me about the bipolar diagnosis was that I didn't experience, and I talked to my ex-wife about it, and she said she didn't remember any moments when I was hypomanic.
Yeah.
When I was drinking, maybe.
And that could easily just be attributable to
That
alcohol.
was attributable to the alcohol.
Right.
But no periods when I had excess energy, when I would stay up all night writing something, or stay up all night cleaning the kitchen, or painting the ceiling, or whatever.
I've always been blown away when people would tell me that they would do that.
Right.
I worked with accountants who would stay up all night fixing their roof.
Right.
And then come in the next day and go to work. And now I have a very different view of how and why they were operating the way that they were.
Right. That's hypomania.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they don't obsess over thoughts.
No,
They
do
might.
not.
I mean, they might get depressed. But even depression in bipolar 2 is often debilitating depression.
Yeah.
It's not the depression of rumination.
No.
It's the depression. It's an existential problem.
That's exactly what I was gonna. Yeah. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Or that is exactly what it feels like. Noting that very little in life is actually existential.
Totally. So when I started the Wellbutrin, the rumination stopped. It just stopped cold again. So it had stopped cold when I started the luracidone. It started up about a year later again. So I believe the luracidone kind of wore off. I wasn't taking a significant enough dose for really it to continue to work. I started on the Wellbutrin, the bupropion, and the rumination just stopped cold.
Yeah.
I wasn't waking up at 3:30 in the morning. I wasn't worried about stuff. The depression cleared up.
Yeah.
So, and the focus cleared up. And I realized that one of the things that made me frustrated was a lack of focus.
Okay.
Which is one of the things that's sort of interesting about these conditions, right, is autism, borderline personality, bipolar, ADHD, OCD, hypervigilance, CPTSD.
Yep.
They all overlap in symptoms,
Yeah.
right?
And I've
They
heard
don't
several of those
completely
diagnoses.
overlap.
Yeah.
Right? They don't completely overlap. And one of the things that distinguishes bipolar is excessive energy, which I didn't have. So it's I think it's easy enough to kind of diagnose all this stuff.
Yeah.
Based on a kind of just an 80-20 rule. Right?
And a lot of the diagnoses are just sort of a starting point, right?
Yeah.
Because then they will start to play with various SSRIs and say, hey, it's no big deal. This will be fine. We'll just see how this goes. And if there are any negative effects, we could try something else.
Totally.
Which, given the nature of what they're doing, is probably okay, but it's also a little bit horrifying.
Yeah. Well, the common problem is executive function,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And executive function can manifest as impulse control problems. It can manifest as, largely impulse control problems. It can manifest as rumination, depression, right?
Incapacitation from any of those.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is, the problem with psychiatry is that an atypical antipsychotic can work as well on borderline personality as it works on some forms of autism, as it works on some forms of ADHD or OCD or bipolar. So it might be prescribed specifically for bipolar. It might be intended specifically for bipolar.
Sure.
But it will work on those other symptoms.
Because it's working on similar neurotransmitters
Right.
and blocking or unblocking various channels in the brain, essentially.
Totally. And so it works. So the question then is often, and my therapist pointed this out to me. He's like, it doesn't really matter what your diagnosis is. It's whether the medication works.
That's right. Yeah. The only reason the diagnosis matters is that it helps you to frame up your experience for other people.
And it codes for insurance.
Yeah, and codes for insurance. That's true.
But fundamentally, yeah, it gives you that it
brings us back to that
the
linguistic
vocabulary.
Right.
It structures the vocabulary that you use to communicate your problem.
And bringing us full circle, it is inherently inaccurate and inadequate to the expression of what is actually happening, which should be, let's call it, problematic for people like you and me.
Totally.
Nearly existentially so.
Well, because
And I'm thinking more of our systems processing and the way that we design and operate. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think like the problem is trying to assign a set of terms to the experience.
Yes.
Right?
When all experience is extremely individual.
Yeah. Well, and you run into this, you see this phrase repeated in autism and bipolar and OCD and ADHD. If you've seen one bipolar patient, you've seen one bipolar patient. If you've seen one person with autism, you've seen one person with autism, right?
Yeah.
Because the range of these disorders, there's a phrase in philosophy called family resemblance term.
Okay.
Right? Philosophy language called family resemblance term, which is this idea that there can be terms that sort of describe the same thing, but not necessarily precisely overlap.
Yeah.
Right? So different kinds of words can mean roughly the same thing, but you really need all of the words to mean the whole.
Right. And it's part of why I think it's part of the reason that the common parlance in these refers to the spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's a little hand wavy because I think it has to be. Like the reporting on any of these experiences is, like many experiences, fraught, let's call it.
Totally. So you get psychosis from cannabis. You believe that you're having an episode of grandiosity and hypomania. You only need one episode of hypomania to be bipolar 2.
Yeah.
You've got an associated depression. You've got bipolar 2.
Yeah. Crap.
You stop taking cannabis because you don't want to interfere with your atypical antipsychotic. You never have another episode of hypomania, but you're still bipolar 2.
Right. Right. And now we're just developing a problem with a set of theoretically related experiences.
Totally. You have treatment-resistant depression.
Yes.
Because you've also got rumination.
Yeah.
And the atypical antipsychotic wears off. You've got the rumination. That causes depression. But it's treatment-resistant because no matter what they give you, it doesn't stop the rumination.
So, and this is a bit of I think about this a lot, especially when talking with you, because you and I have very different experiences, but also some very similar outcomes to the experiences. And I remember the rumination like it was yesterday, and thankfully it was a few years ago. And I'm very curious because you know that I've taken a very different path on treating all of the things, different things.
Yeah.
Actually, they might be more closely aligned than I had thought before the other day when we chatted. But why did you choose to move toward the pharmaceutical medication versus some of the alternative options that are out there?
Because I asked for a diagnosis.
Okay, that's fair.
And he said, we treat that with Latuda.
Okay.
With lurasidone.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, no, that was not a judgment, by the way.
Yeah. No, the thing is, like, for years I sensed that something was wrong.
Yes.
I'd have an anger outburst with my kids or my wife. I would be paranoid about my boss. Yeah. I would ruminate for days on end about
God, get out of my head.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And I would get I would have a kind of an emotional crash.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that something was wrong.
Yeah.
I'd completely forgotten about the bipolar diagnosis until I talked to the psychiatric nurse, right?
Yeah.
And described the voices. And the psychiatrist that I just most recently talked to said it was probably the case that the psychiatric nurse was adopting that diagnosis at 18 because that was the last doctor's
And it was in the
diagnosis.
record.
'Cause
Oh,
that
I
was
didn't
in
even
the
think
record.
about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's a theory of truth there,
there is.
right? And it goes that the last authority to make the diagnosis is the diagnosis
Right.
until proven otherwise.
And there was enough overlap in symptomology, especially in the way that you described or defined things in the language that she understood, that sort of doubled down or reinforced that diagnosis.
And so if the psychiatric nurse had said to me, you got to go to therapy, I would have gone to therapy. I was already in therapy at that point because I was dealing with depression.
Yeah.
But I figured I needed something more powerful because I was hearing people talk about me in the street, right?
Yeah. I remember you telling me that, and I was a little freaked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was probably cannabis. Like, that's
could have
the
been.
thing. Like, that's
Yeah.
that was self-induced,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the curious thing here is, like, you know, there is a kind of a delusion here,
Oh, for sure.
which is the self-medication delusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea that the self-medication isn't having any impact, or it's only having a positive impact. And the
Sure.
thing about something like cannabis is that it's a wide spectrum. It has a wide spectrum of effects,
It does.
right?
And everybody that I talk to has different experiences of it.
Totally.
And when I tell people that I'm not smoking anymore because it would cause me serious issues, they'd say, "What are you talking about? It just chills me out." I'm like, "Well,
Right.
good for you."
Yeah.
A little jealous because would love
Totally.
to
I'd
just
love
smoke
be
a joint
Willie
and watch
Nelson.
a movie. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Right.
Get creative with it. Let's
Yeah,
go.
exactly.
I don't get that.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true. Caffeine in cannabis with a bit of cacao, and I'm going to write about 12 pages in 5 minutes.
Right.
But that's a different.
I find that what I write is not necessarily all that good.
No, it's not, but it feels really good to do
It
it.
feels really good to do it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it even feels like it's good at the time. It's that creative expression or
Yeah.
the feeling that you're being able to just get it out,
Yeah.
which is nice.
Totally.
It's funny, a lot of overlaps here and a lot of parallels, and I just want to reflect on that a little bit. It took my wife basically saying, "This is messed up. You need to do something," to get me to go to therapy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I didn't believe in it. It's that I didn't think I needed it because this is normal. Like,
Right.
this is just life. This is just experiencing life. And it turns out it's not.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people are going to listen to this, but go to therapy.
Oh, totally.
Like, just go to therapy.
Well, I think it's very common for people to think, this isn't messed up, I'm just an asshole. Because that was
I've heard people say that.
certainly the experience I had for many years. It was
Okay.
just that feeling, the paranoia about
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
was because I was just underconfident. The anger outbursts were because I was an asshole,
Yeah.
right? Like, part of the problem here is that I think people have such tenuous senses of self,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know if that's a modern thing. I don't
no
know
idea.
if you go to the Hadza and ask them, do you have a tenuous sense of self? They'd be like, oh yeah, give me the therapist, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case. But I think that many people do have really tenuous senses of self. And so the idea that they might have, that therapy might benefit them,
Yeah.
or that they might have a personality disorder, that the rumination might not be deserved. Because I think that's the problem, right?
It might be. It could also be that a lot of these are largely societal issues where we have, and I'm not saying just because we have this current outbreak of,
Late stage capitalism.
I wasn't going there, but there might be something to it. I was going to go more towards the isolationism of men.
Right.
and yours all occurred pre-COVID. Most of mine came up during or post-COVID during some of the isolation elements when I started to lose.
Well, that's basically when I lost it too. Was
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
a lot of the stress, the hypervigilance really comes to a point. The therapeutic effect of the cannabis starts to get warped.
Oh,
And I
interesting.
really start to, the anxiety really starts to show up again, but in different ways. I'm not ruminating.
Yeah.
I'm not visibly anxious, but I am getting more delusional, basically.
Yeah.
More psychotic, right?
I think for me it was more the removal of honestly the conversational support systems.
Yeah, totally. That was the thing.
And maybe we're moving toward the same element there.
I think the thing is, like, I was stuck in the garage for 9 months.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was cold and it was dark.
Yeah.
Or it was hot
Or it was really
and it was
hot.
dark.
Yeah.
And we had fires at that point too.
Yep.
That was the very famous moment when the skies in San Francisco turned orange, right?
God.
And it hasn't happened since.
No, right.
Knock on wood.
Dude, I just came from LA. Let's go.
Right, exactly. But it was obvious that the Trump administration was lying through its teeth and basically incapable of managing its way out of a wet paper bag, right? And it was a scary time. It was just a completely scary time.
Yeah. And I suspect that a lot of the underlying issues, probably for both of us, probably for a lot of people,
Yeah.
a lot of the underlying issues were there, but we had just enough of a societal support system, a pseudo-tribal support system, that we were able to keep it at bay. And it really only took rug pulling
Yeah,
that from us to make that an issue.
totally. Well, I loved my job. That was the thing. I loved the community.
Same.
I loved the group of people that I worked with,
Yeah.
right?
They are still some of the closest people to me.
Totally. Totally. Best place I've worked at.
Yeah.
And I worked at a lot of places, but never as long as I have at this place.
Yeah. Wes was one of the people that encouraged me to do some of the things that I did. Not some of the stranger things that I've done, but the way he phrased it, and I've probably said this before, I was very against getting on an SSRI because I did not want to be on for life.
Right.
And he convinced me, between him and my wife, convinced me that you're trying to build a boat in the middle of the ocean while you're drowning. Put on a goddamn life vest.
Right. Yeah.
He didn't say it in those terms. He was more Wes and more kind about it.
Right.
But when I would reiterate it later, I was like, yeah, I need to put on a goddamn life vest.
Yeah. That's the thing.
And it helped, but I personally chose to treat it as a life vest to get me over a hump. And then I started seeking out alternative approaches that would keep me off of things. So far, so good.
Well,
So far, so good is what I'll say. And it doesn't mean they were all positive experiences.
they're all
either.
prosthetics, right?
That's a great, you've said that before, and I think that's a great frame for that.
They're all prosthetics.
Yeah.
And you know, like, I take artificial B12 to stay alive. Yeah. And I take...
You've got me taking B12 now, too, because I have some nerve issues. Yeah.
Right. And I take artificial thyroid hormone to stay alive. And so I am on these prosthetics.
For life.
For life.
Yeah.
I had, chemotherapy, which is a prosthetic that helped get rid of the cancer.
Absolutely.
And I've had, so the idea of being on a psychiatric drug didn't scare me because I'm on prosthetics. I prefer not to be on a prosthetic.
Sure.
But I'm already on them.
Yeah.
So
what's one more?
An additional prosthetic. It'd be great if I didn't have to. I didn't have to. One of the things that I like about the diagnosis of OCD...
That is the best start to a sentence I've ever heard.
As compared to bipolar is that bipolar is a fundamental problem with neurotransmitter configuration.
Yes.
OCD is theoretically learnable.
Yes. Which means unlearnable.
Unlearnable. Right? So the current thinking about OCD is that it is a response to hypervigilance.
Yeah.
Right? So process the trauma deal with the, use CBT to deal with the cognitive behavioral therapy, to deal with which I've seen people describe as, gaslighting yourself.
That's not wrong.
Right. But, use CBT to learn to manage the anxiety.
Yep.
And you don't even necessarily have to process the trauma. You just have to learn to manage the anxiety that comes along with the trauma.
Yeah.
And theoretically, the OCD diminishes to the point where it's not noticeable or not manageable.
Yeah.
The other thing though is that, like, the Wellbutrin's a lifesaver. I mean, I don't have rumination because of the Wellbutrin, so I'm not stopping it.
Yeah.
It makes it is a life jacket.
Yeah.
Because the thing with OCD is that it feels like the rumination feels like there are weights attached to you and you are trying to swim.
Yeah. For me, it became, that's an interesting way of describing it. For me, it was part and parcel with just firestorms in my mind.
Yeah.
Anytime I'd close my eyes, all I saw was fire.
Right.
And I tried to draw it. I tried to find ways of reproducing what I saw when I closed my eyes, and it was hellish and nightmarish.
Yeah.
And, what was it? Like very low dose Lexapro helped with that for a bit. And I was like, okay, great. But I did not like the side effects, or the effects, I guess we should call them.
Yeah.
Because there were some pretty weird effects for me. I felt dull. I felt slower. There were sexual issues. Like, it's just things that happen.
And that's...
I chose not to do, but those were the effects that impacted me.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean Wellbutrin does any of that to you.
No. And it doesn't mean Lexapro will do that to anybody else.
No, it does not. Yeah.
I mean, it will do it to other people.
It absolutely will.
But it doesn't mean it will do it to any one individual, because,
Correct.
Again, if you've met
All
one
of
person
these.
with OCD,
You've met one person with
OCD, right?
Yeah.
I like...
And for what it's worth, I mean, this may be the healthiest that I've seen you.
Oh, yeah, it's the healthiest
Like,
I've
it's
been.
not close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And that's a positive statement. Like, that's not denigrating prior use, although you were very enjoyable in certain states.
Right. Well, I think one of the things, this comes back to the tenuousness of the self, right?
Yeah.
Is that, like, especially when you've got a mental illness, the fundamental problem is an identity problem.
I haven't considered it that way, but that really tracks.
Right?
Because a lot of the work that I have done since that moment has largely been identity work.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I think the problem is, and this is the reason why I felt the bipolar diagnosis was accurate, was because there would be moments when I didn't feel in control of my brain, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know cognitively what I was doing, right? I remember just recently, my girlfriend and I had gone to visit my mom in southern Saskatchewan, and we were driving north of there, and I was having a ruminative episode. Mm-hmm. And she described it as, she said she could see that I was struggling.
Wait, in the car on the drive?
In the car on the drive.
During
it was
daylight?
very uncomfortable. Oh, yeah. And she didn't know what was going on. She you know, I mean, she knew that there was a problem, but she didn't know how to and she doesn't have mental illness.
Yeah.
So it's hard for her to kind of empathize, right? Like, she can't.
Yeah.
This is one of the things I've mentioned to you a few times about about these medications, is that they remove the conditions for the illness, right? So they restructure serotonin and dopamine in a high level glossy way. They restructure serotonin and dopamine so that you can't reproduce the emotional state.
Right.
Right? So the feeling I always had was like I was hitting the end of a video game. I couldn't go beyond the boundary.
Yeah.
Right? I felt
You're
like I was
you're
on
at the
track.
wall in Skyrim, like when you can't get
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a wall. And so I could remember theoretically that I used to have a problem, but I couldn't reproduce it in my head. And this was one of the things that I'd done, most of my life was it was like touching a scab or poking at a bruise, right? You'd remember a period of rumination and you'd kind of go back in there, and it was like standing at the edge of a cliff, right? And you pull back and you go a little bit and you pull back, like, oh. But this was no longer possible on these medications, right?
Yeah.
But this was at the point at which the lorazepam had stopped working, and I just didn't know. It seems really simple to say it, but I didn't know what to think, right?
It's funny to consider that as something simple to say.
Right.
Because that is a very complicated statement.
Right. I didn't know what to think. And if you think back to your episodes of rumination,
right,
that is part of the problem, is you don't know what to think. Your identity is destabilized because the obsessive thought won't stop. It becomes central to the process, to the process of thinking. You can't stop thinking about it. You can't think your way through it.
Yeah.
You can't get above it. Right?
And everything was existential.
Yeah.
Like it was required that these issues be resolved, that even though there was nothing you could do at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
You knew how 75 things had to happen in order to resolve it the way that you wanted it. And you knew you had no control. So if any of those 75 things fell apart, it was end of days.
Totally. And you had to remember every single one.
Every single one, which is why I would start writing.
Right. You
Yeah.
you can't, this is the thing, one of my experiences with rumination is, and since I've gone off the lorazepam, I've started to have more intrusive thoughts in the last few weeks. And one of my kind of OCD experiences is remembering to do things in order.
Yeah.
Right? And
that's not a bad thing.
Catching myself, well, it is when it's like work and you have a panic moment the night before, and you think, I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got to do this.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to forget, so you keep reminding yourself.
Yep.
And you keep reminding yourself, and you slowly get more and more anxious because you think you're going to forget.
Yikes.
And you get in the shower and you're like, I got to remember. And then you remember. And
Oh,
then
you're
think,
back at that.
Right.
Oh, I'm so glad I don't have that right now. That's not bragging. That's just thank goodness.
Right.
Because I went through that, and I'm so happy not to be there right now.
And I've started to develop it again, but because I've kind of been working on exposure response and prevention therapy, which is the CBT, the form of CBT they use for OCD. I'm catching those, right?
Yeah.
Like it's interesting to sort of catch these and realize that these have disrupted my normal identity for most of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, that's fair. I was going to posit that maybe they were actually a part of your normal identity.
This is the question about what to think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but isn't it fun to go down all the avenues, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not fun.
It's not
except
it's not
for like
fun to do it.
Except it can't. Yeah, but it's all an exploration, and I see it all as an exploration of our consciousness. And maybe that's a little bit naive.
See, that's the thing. I don't think rumination is an exploration of consciousness.
You're probably right. And back in the day, I might have argued a little more vehemently. In fact, I did.
You did argue.
I did.
You argued that there was a productive
felt that it could be.
aspect to rumination.
I'll own that. I still have some suspicions around that.
Right.
But I also like to ram my head against walls.
Well, the thing is, I
Not
think,
literally.
to kind of come back to the idea of proof, right?
Yeah.
Like proof, requires rumination.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, I think one of the things that makes me good at proof is the ability to constructively ruminate.
And okay. And so to continue from there, you may be going this direction anyway. I might just be taking the bait. You're clever. That you have the propensity for productive rumination may also have been what led to the destructive rumination.
Right.
And it was just a step beyond what was a productive, healthy evolutionary response.
Right.
To various stimuli.
Totally.
That evolves in certain individuals.
Absolutely. I think the problem with rumination is that you get good at productive rumination.
Yeah. And your body says let's do more, or your brain says let's do more.
You can't turn it off.
Yeah.
You get anxious, depressed, you get an irrational hypervigilance.
Yeah.
Right? And you try to apply productive rumination to it. And I can kind of consciously remember being 10, 11, 12 and thinking, I can think my way out of this anxiety.
Out of anything. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm starting to wonder, and this is an N=2 sort of an idea right here, but these maladies, I guess I could call them, that we're describing may be peculiar to certain mental structures or brain types or archetypes that we happen to represent.
Yeah.
And we are, I'll pat both of us on the back. We are fairly good at the things that we do as potentially a result of the way that we operate and think, and we are a little bit more likely to develop some of these issues than maybe the Gen Pop would.
Yeah.
And I think that's just sort of a cost or a risk associated with us being wired the way that we're wired, at least in this frame.
Right.
And so I wonder, it was something that I was a little worried about when going on to pharmaceuticals. One of my big concerns was, but will I stop being able to think the way I like to think? And you had mentioned, sort of that mediation of the wave, the highs and the lows. And have you noticed any issues with your capacity to think the way that you used to think?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. That's actually fascinating.
Right.
And it throws mud. It may or may not throw mud in the face of what I was describing, but it may just be a moderation.
Well, I think there's this
because you are as sharp as ever right now, and I'm really happy to see that.
Like it.
Yeah.
I think the thing about unproductive rumination is it's a derangement of the proof process, for lack of a better term.
That's a great way to put it.
Right?
Yeah.
But it is a derangement. It is
It's sort of an overreaction to.
Yeah, it's an overreaction. Right? And it could be focused on a hypervigilant source trauma, right?
Yeah.
It could be biochemical.
There is reason to suspect that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I had more anxiety, and I think this is common with people with pernicious anemia. I had more anxiety when I had pernicious anemia.
Sure.
Specifically because it was doing damage to my neurology. It was doing damage to my brain, right? My nervous system. And so it was causing a feeling of jangliness, right? Because the nerves were dying. And so it is, I think it's reasonable to suspect that one of the causes of unproductive rumination is physical.
Yeah.
Right? And we talked a little bit about the fact that, it's difficult to know with these conditions whether they're sourced in a neurotransmitter substrate or whether they're sourced in a cognitive pattern of thought, right?
Right.
Like a reaction,
right.
a learned thing. And I think that
I don't see why it can't be a combination.
Right. I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's if you think there's this long and honorable tradition of trying to single source diseases, right?
Oh, we like our simple answers.
Is cancer and
right.
induced or internal?
Right.
Right? Endogenous or exogenous?
Right. Environmental or whatever.
right? Or a genetic misfire,
Right,
And
right.
and the answer is yes,
Yeah, it seems to be.
right?
It seems to be. And looking at the statistics of the epidemiology, it does look like it is a confluence of events.
Totally.
There are some that are a little bit more obvious. We see higher rates of, say, lung cancer in smokers or those that are
Right.
smoker adjacent. But cancer is a wide net.
Right. And just because you don't smoke doesn't mean you can't get lung cancer.
That's right. Even if you don't live in a home with a smoker, you can still develop it for
still
other
develop it.
reasons.
Totally.
Don't live near paper factories.
You
I'm
can
told.
you can develop it for purely genetic reasons. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
And so I think
And you
think,
can be the 105-year-old Italian guy who smoked a cigar every day since he was 12
And not
have
get-
the most beautiful lungs ever seen.
totally.
Yeah.
I think like the thing is that the brain, I mean the body in general, but the nervous system itself is such a complex system that it's really easy to throw it out of whack, right? And throw it out of whack in little ways. That in the same way that a specific mutation that doesn't get cleaned up can
Right.
turn into cancer.
Right.
All it takes is one cell,
Yeah.
which is scary as fuck, but all it takes is one cell, right?
Yeah.
All it takes is, it can be as simple as almost getting hit by a car when you accidentally step out in the street,
Yeah.
right?
So many little near misses.
So many little near misses, and you interpret that near miss. You happen to be in a frame of mind at that particular point in time that makes that thing sticky, and you start to develop what used to be called a tick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Or shell shock if you
shell
came
shock.
back from World War II and had moments.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are people who come back from war and have no problem. They have no PTSD at all, right? Although it's doubtful that they
Yeah.
know, but there are people whose impact has been minimal.
Yeah. Yeah. Or yes. It seems to be that way.
So
Yeah, we should. Dave, thank you. I know we've been at this for a minute.
yeah,
Or almost exactly 2 hours. I'm good with that.
cool.
Thanks for having me up, having me
problem.
out, having me in here
It's
in
been
your
a good
house.
conversation.
Yeah, our conversations are generally good, which is why I invited you to do this.
Yeah,
I
thank
appreciate it. We could do 7 more of these. We just scratched the surface.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll do this again if you're open to it.
yeah,
Yeah, really appreciate you, Dave.
cool. No problem. Thanks, JT.
I'll see you around.
Yep.